Real quick again, if you haven't subscribed to the Fanily or Say Halo Goodbye Gaming yet, the links are in the description below. Please, please, please do it. Okay, shameless self-promotion out of the way. If you've seen my 15,000 subscriber special, you already know that I'm a big fan of Bob's Burgers. The show is fresh, funny, and rejects the previous notions of how children in sitcoms are supposed to behave like played-out stereotypes. And truly, while Bob and Linda and the other adult characters are hysterical, it's the Belcher kids that really make this show work. While all three of the kids are amazing in their own right, today I want to talk about Gene in particular. Gene is weird. There's no nicer way to say it. And for many seasons, I thought that he was just an odd kid who owned being strange. He liked to fly his freak flag. However, after binge watching season 7 again, I think there might be more to Gene's behavior than just being off kilter. Long story short, even though Tina was playfully called out as having autism early on in the series, I really think Gene is the one who has high-functioning autism, and there are actually lots of clues to prove this is a reasonable diagnosis. Now, let me clarify before the angry mob comes out. My daughter also has high-functioning autism, so I'm not making this video as some kind of joke to poke fun at people with invisible disabilities. It's a very diverse and complicated issue to deal with, and contrary to popular belief, autism is not a mental retardation. Autism is more like having a brain that works in a different way. People with autism can be great scientists, or artists, or writers, you name it. Many signs of autism point to issues in the social areas, like having no verbal filter, difficulty making friends your own age, not understanding the idea of social acceptability, etc., etc., etc. Funny enough, those are all things that Gene has regularly displayed in the series. Now, there are physical signs that can manifest with autism, including behaviors like flapping hands and sensitivity to sounds, but you don't have to have every single item on a checklist to be autistic. That's why it's called ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, because there's a huge range of possible behaviors involved. Looking at Gene, he constantly speaks as if he has no filter. Nothing in his head to say, hey, maybe don't say that out loud, buddy. And that happens in almost every line he has in the entire series. Plus, Gene says whatever's on his mind, regardless of who he's speaking to. Other kids, his parents, teachers, it doesn't matter to him. Gene is 11, and yes, from experience, it's true that kids that age can be really sarcastic. Yet, we never really have a reason to believe that Gene is insincere with most of his comments. Even early on in the series, Gene talks about peeing in the burger suit, and it doesn't seem like he's trying to be funny. Throughout season 7, it seems like Gene's behavioral abnormalities are getting really highlighted. It's not just quirky comments anymore. The behaviors are getting more noticeable too. For instance, when Gene is put in charge of babysitting Louise in Large Brother Where Fart Thou, Gene's brain seems to just be breaking down internally when faced with an unexpected conflict and challenge. In the episode Like Gene for Chocolate, Gene sees nothing abnormal with walking into a candy factory and befriending one of the adults in charge. Okay, it's weird that the man-child in charge of the factory befriends a kid too, don't get me wrong, but Gene acts like he doesn't really get why this is socially inappropriate. These types of behaviors openly escalate in the Laser Nth, where Gene and Bob go to a laser light show, and Gene has an emotional meltdown over the volume of the music and freaks out until they leave. Really, you could debate a lot of Gene's behaviors as being socially awkward or naive, but this level of a sound sensitivity strongly points to autism in my opinion. Perhaps the most convincing proof of Gene's autism is Louise. Have you ever noticed that Tina is a very calm, good girl type, while Louise is unstoppable? Well, of course you've noticed that if you've watched the show for more than 10 seconds. Likewise, I'm sure you've noticed that Gene and Louise act almost alike, except that Louise tends to be motive-based, meaning she has a plan of action for her behavior, whereas Gene is just doing Gene with no real rhyme or reason. Did you happen to know that it's very common for the younger siblings of an autistic child to severely really act out for attention. So if you're 2 years younger than your brother and his behavior is getting him extra attention while your normal behavior isn't, what do? Well, you start to mimic what works. Over time, though, Louise realized how to use these non-standard behaviors to her benefit, not only for attention, but for basically owning whatever world she walks into, because she's trained herself not to think like everyone else. So, although all of the Belcher kids are off-kilter, I think Louise's issues are mostly a learned behavior, and Tina is just in a weird transitional part of her life where she's awkward but not fully conscious of it yet. But back on Jean's character, do you know what is utterly great about Bob's Burgers? The fact that Jean is different and it's not very subtle, yet no one is trying to fix him. They aren't putting him into therapy or medicating him, and instead of correcting his off-putting behaviors, everyone just goes with it. No one treats him like he's broken, no one excludes him, no one makes him feel ashamed for existing. They just treat him like, oh, that's our Jean. As far as Bob and Linda go, I don't think they're fully aware that Jean has autism or really any kind of disorder, so I'm sure a diagnosis of any kind would come as a shock to them. I'd also like to guess that Linda used to know someone with undiagnosed autism when she was growing up, which would explain why she's never felt any red flags over Jean's behavior, and she's always encouraged him to just be Jean. She's a good mama. But whether or not his parents are aware, Jean having so many signs of autism is actually a great thing for the series to not fully address. If Jean got a diagnosis, then it would become, oh, poor Jean, something's wrong with him, and he wouldn't be able to really be himself anymore. He'd always have that stigma hanging over his head. Even if his family didn't do it, the other people in town would do it, the viewers would do it, it would just, the whole thing would get murky and bad. So for the series to show autism without explaining autism, it actually makes Jean a stronger candidate for a role model, because people familiar with autism see the signs, see how Jean's uninhibited, and that no one treats him poorly over it, which opens the door so that other kids with autism can see that they're not lesser for their issues and they're not alone, they're just different. And it also shows neurotypical people, oh, I've seen people that act like that before on Bob's Burgers, so I kind of know how to handle this person in front of me. So even viewers that don't catch on that Jean has a disability are kind of becoming aware and more sensitive to it because of this show. And that's completely brilliant. Well, that's all I have for now, but this video's not quite over yet. We're expanding, so I have to plug our other channels. Total, we have the Fangirl, dealing primarily with movies and shows, Say Halo Goodbye Gaming, and the Family Vlogs. Links are in the description, and we would love to see you at all 3 channels. Okay, I think that's it. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed enough to like, subscribe, and share this video. We have tons of material across our various channels that you are fully encouraged to go check out. And if somehow you can't get enough of me, please connect with me on Instagram at sayhalogoodbye or Twitter at @the_Fanily.